said, this is a creativity energizer. So I'm certainly hoping that at the end of it all, you will feel both more creative and energized about being more creative. My approach to creativity is that it's all about doing far more than it is about understanding. It's not in your head, it's in you. So these energizers are going to ultimately lead to little things that you can do that will help you to be more creative. So we need to talk a little bit about what creative is, but before we do that, what I would like to do is play a little game. So this is a bit of audience participation. Sorry, I need to get the gallery view up. There we go. I want to see you guys. So, simple question. This. What is it?
Chair.
Chair.
This is a chair?
Seat.
Seat, okay. Thing, we come in, sit down. Comfortable, or maybe it's not comfortable.
It's furniture.
It's a chair. Everybody happy with that?
Piece of wood.
Yeah, it's what we spend a lot of time on these days.
Okay.
Too much time.
Far too much.
If I was to do this, what is it now?
An
Very
upside
uncomfortable chair.
Fallen over.
Very uncomfortable chair. An upside down chair. What else did I hear there?
It's a den,
A den.
Ooh.
or a cave, or a tunnel.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. It's definitely, well, I wouldn't fit, but I could imagine that somebody might. Okay, then.
Thank God that's a sock.
16, Shane.
So, now. I have a few more here. So.
Is it a clothes horse?
Oh, yeah, no, what is it? Yeah, it's a clothes horse.
Or a sock storage unit.
Or a sock storage unit.
Or furniture in a teenager's room.
It's been otherwise known as abstract art of some kind. Abstract semi-functional art.
You could probably sell that for millions these days, Shane.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I plan to. I'm expecting you all to sign an NDA before we finish this. So I had a chair, and then I had a clothes horse. Now what is it?
The chair again.
Chair.
Chair again. Okay. Is that all it is?
Well, it can still be a tunnel.
It can.
And it could still be a clothes horse.
It could be, but what kind of clothes horse would it be?
One for jackets, not socks.
Huh? Or even as a clothes horse for socks, how would we describe it?
And you can turn it back upside down again, convert it back.
Good. Or we could just say that it's an upside down clothes horse. As much as it was an upside down chair when it was also a clothes horse. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, what I want you to think about here is when I said to you, this is a chair, or I asked you what it was and you said it's a chair, it makes absolute sense. That's the right answer. And the reason it's the right answer is because one thing about thinking, which we don't often think about, is that the real purpose of thinking is not to think. What your brain likes to do is go, I've worked this out. I now know what this is for. And when I need to use it for what it's for, I will use it for what it's for. And you don't even think about that. You just walk into the room and you sit, because that's what you do in a room. And this is what you sit on when you're in a room. Yeah. So it's efficient and it works. And that's fine. We shouldn't have any problem with that. But it does come with a limitation. And the limitation is that we see things as fixed. So what I want you to start to think about, how I want to shift your mindset a tiny bit, is to stop thinking that this is a chair and start thinking that this is used as a chair. So tiny little shift from is to is used as. Now, I'm going to suggest that that tiny little shift in your mindset is the fundamental element of innovation and creativity. That without that shift, it's very difficult to be creative, and with it, the potential is virtually limitless. Yeah? Does that seem even a little bit credible? So I want you to try something. Have a look around the room, pick something, think of another use for it. Now you're probably all thinking, I better come up with a good answer. This wasn't a very good clothes horse, was it? That doesn't matter. What matters is it was a different use. Forget about good, just think about different. So have another look around the room. Pick something, think of a different use for it.
My sofa looks quite good as a bed sometimes.
Yes. So what else has anybody got? What else did you see that you might find a different use for?
A curtain became a cloak.
Ah,
I have encyclopedia, which I never read. It's now being used as the prompter for my screen. So
right. Yeah.
It's a very big book.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Got a mobile phone, which can be used as a camera or like a distraction instead of a phone.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that thing where you just look at things and go, I wonder what that could be. You know, I have a picture on the wall here. I could use it as a tray. You know, that's the thing I want you to think about. Now, let me just quickly share a file because I actually have a little definition of this that I like to use. So this is the shift we're talking about. So just checking. Can you see that all right?
Yeah.
So this is a chair. Oops. Becomes this is used as a chair. So creativity is the act of looking for possibilities, of loosening the edges of things. Now, the reason I use this phrase, loosening the edges of things, is because I think it makes it seem a little bit easier. Unlike Rob, we're not trying to invent a nuclear reactor. We're not trying to fundamentally change the world. We're just trying to see a little bit more possibility in the things that are around us. So just shifting a little bit. And if you shift things a little bit, often, then what you end up with is more possibilities. Okay? So one more little exercise for you. I asked you to look around the room and think of a different use for something in the room. I suspect that none of you considered a different use for yourselves.
No.
So think about yourself in the same way. Can you think of a different use for you? And I don't mean being an astronaut, unless you really want to be an astronaut. I mean, a different use for you that might take 5 minutes. Something that you could do that would be just different, just for the sake of it. Anything coming to mind?
For me, actually, just to get up and dance.
Nice. Why not?
I was going to swap places with my dog, but I'm not quite sure that's a good idea.
An idea is a good idea. Doing it doesn't necessarily.
True, that is very
follow.
true.
The point of ideas is to have them, not necessarily to follow them. Yeah.
I think it's a very hard question to answer because this is much bigger and it takes a lot more thinking as well.
It does.
And I think it, like if we think about it, can we think of the different use of our time? I think because when you asked me that question, I was thinking about what can I do? But then I was like, oh, what can I do with the next 5 minutes I have, or, you know, the 10 minutes break I have? It's a little bit easier than thinking about how to use myself.
Okay, well, let me give you an example then to sort of try and make it a little bit simpler, if a little bit stranger at the same time. A long time ago, I taught art classes to school children, and I was basing a lot of it on what I'd learned in art school. So it was quite sort of playful approach to art rather than here's how to do a thing. And the youngest person in the class was 3 years of age. And we were playing with paint on a piece of glass and taking prints off it. And she came up to me at the front of the class and she had got paint on her nose and she was upset. And she said, I've got paint on my nose. What am I going to do? And I looked at her for a minute and I said, how about you paint with your nose? And she thought this was hilarious and spent the next 2 hours daubing paint onto her nose and putting her nose onto a page and making. I often wonder whether that experience had any ripple effect in her life, because I have no idea. But it's a tiny little thing where she just said, okay, I'm going to have some fun. And why not? Yeah. All too often we burden the things that we want to do with the need to be valuable, with the need to be important, with the need to be good use of our time. I think there's an enormous amount of value in putting a little bit of time aside to do things that don't have to give back straight away, that are just things that are about loosening the edges of yourself. And that's really the thought that I'd like to leave you with is, as you go through the day, as you go through the week, give a tiny bit of time to just thinking, could I do this differently? Could I use this differently? Could I use my time differently? And don't burden it with the need to be good. Just burden it with the need to be different in some tiny little way.
Challenge accepted.
Yes?
Yeah.
It can be challenging. Does it feel challenging?
No.
Yeah.
I actually think that the hardest part of the challenge is not expecting yourself to actually follow through to action, is to just think differently and to let it be a thought as opposed to have to be a follow through.
Yeah, you have a choice to follow through, obviously, when you want to. But yeah, maybe you're putting too much burden on yourself for your thoughts to be valuable and useful. And, you know, if I think it, I have to do it, or I'm wasting time thinking.
I think that valuable thing is very important at the moment. I think because everyone's at home, they almost feel an extra need to perform and do more. So yeah, that's definitely something to bear in mind.
So with that in mind, what I suggest to you, I mean, we're going to do a series of these over the next few weeks, and I guess people will drop in and drop out. But I'd love you to just try it, to just say, you know, I'll put 5 minutes in a day, sometime in the next week, just to think about something that I might do different, something that I might use differently. And it can be
Shane,
yes.
are you talking about this in the professional kind of remit or a personal remit, as in the habits that we're doing? Can we do it differently? Say, for example, if I like to make dinners, am I thinking about making different dinners? Or for example, I'm writing a post, a blog, or questioning, should I write it differently?
Yes.
Okay, both.
The answer is yes to all of those.
Okay, that's a very, there's a lot of effort required for
I'm kind of
rethinking everything.
I think I'm with Jing. I think my head is over processing all of the different things of what that means. Does that mean me as a sister, as a friend, as a founder, as a business, as an individual, I could only focus on one, and it's all my head is exploding at the thoughts. Jing.
What's really interesting.
I'm loving that their head is exploding. So, but just pick one.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
What's really interesting there is the idea of what story will I give up?
Yes.
Right. So it's not about you know, it's the story that my food has to be good or better than it was last week, or I have to be a bit, you know, or whatever. It's what story do I give up? And that's a very deep question. But in this context, I suppose, Shane, it's about what preconception do I have about the chair that I have to give up?
Yes.
And how do I move from cooking dinner in a way that was always follow the recipe to doing it slightly differently, or looking at it for a different purpose, or, you know, eating dinner at breakfast time, or vice versa, or whatever it happens to be, that you're soft. And it's just about softening it, isn't it? You're not changing, you know, you're not going to become Steve Jobs overnight, but you might just soften the edges of both the idea and their own stories.
Yeah, and to your point about what you give up, in some ways, in this context, you don't have to give up anything. The chair is still a chair. The chair is still a chair at the end of the process. You can still use it in the same way. All you're doing, and that's why I like the phrase loosening the edges, because you're just allowing things to expand a tiny little bit in potential. And as Joanne said, you don't have to execute any of this. You just have to take a moment to think about it. What if I wrote my blog post differently? How might I do it? And you might think about that briefly 10 times before you ever change anything. And you might never change anything, but at least you'll be doing what you're doing, knowing that there are other choices. As Stephen says, you might think, I wonder what it would be like to have dinner at breakfast time. And you might one day do it, or it might be enough just to think about it. Because it's flexibility in your thinking and re-engaging your brain. Like as Louise is saying, your head is exploding with it, because suddenly your mind is thinking. And that's kind of what I was getting at when I was saying, you know, your mind doesn't want to think about what a chair can be. It just wants to remind you what it is. Whereas there's potential for more, the potential for change, the potential for freedom in your own sense of yourself begins with the willingness to just consider something could be different and treat it as a game. You didn't lose anything except a minute or two to consider that a chair could be a clothes horse or a tunnel for a child.
You know, it's really interesting when you think about, Stephen, what you were saying about the sense of loss. And we think about change as a sense of loss, like I have to give up this thought that I had and replace it with something else. And, you know, when you relate that back to the way our brains work with automaticity, and that reluctance to think different becomes, because it represents work. Mm-hmm. And so if you see potential gain at the end of it, then you're pulled towards that reward. But if you only see potential hard work and you can't see the reward, then your threat response kicks in and you'll go back to automaticity, right? Because it's easier, it's more comfortable.
Like certainty, right?
Yeah.
And also there is an element here of the science of it, that is that our imagination is fueled by our memory. So very often imagination is putting together different memories. So I could go to an event with you, Joanne, in a week or a month or a year's time, tell a completely different story. Because I would have structured that with a bit of my imagination and a bit of my conditioning. But scientifically, what happens is when we imagine something happening in the future, we draw on past memory. We don't actually write a blank canvas, albeit on a blank canvas, albeit we have the capacity to do that. But to do it, we have to step out of the memory. And if we're conditioned that that's the chair and we get lost in that's the chair, or that's the whatever, we just reinforce those memories and we don't become imaginative. So that, you know, I like the idea of not creating a huge goal with this, Shane, and it just becoming a bit of a laugh. And I think it's really important. It just is a bit of a laugh.
Yeah.
As we get tied up in knots about debating, how should I, you know, innovate? You know, how should I, you know, there's a great training video John Cleese did after one of his divorces when he needed to make money. And he's doing a training scenario and he's sitting in front of his boss who's firing him because he never used his initiative. And he's saying to his boss, but you never told me to. You know, but it's really well done. But it's that idea that, you know, don't worry about what else in the house, you know, we can change. Let's worry about the chair. Let's get our, you know, think about, I need to condition myself to say it is used as a chair, and just leave it at that and not worry about, do we do it in 20 aspects of our life or one?
Yeah, for me, what I've just written down here, Shannon, thanks for this is stimulating discussion. It's just imagining new possibilities without commitment. That's what I think it is. So there's no commitment associated with the imagination of what's coming up. So that's what I think where the power is. It's just all the possibilities that are there, but you don't have to act on them. And it's a great way of just generating ideas or brainstorming, I guess. So yeah, I'm really going to enjoy the exercise.
Yeah, I think it's kind of flexing the brain muscle, which is what I think you're trying to do there, Shane. Is
Yes.
Because my first thing was, when I look around, I could feel that I was not frozen, but how do I see these things differently? And then there's other times when you can so easily see things differently. And maybe it's a place as well as a time, but it's how do you build more of that mind flexibility?
Yeah. And, the things that I'm going to go through over the next few weeks are a series of, they're both insights and specific techniques that you can use to make that easier. Like, we're starting here with just the encouragement to try, but just to say, are you willing to consider that something could be different? And when you consider that, what do you come up with? So when we come back to this, I'll show you very specific ways that will help you to get around those instinctive resistances that we all have. And that will help you to find a more playful and confident approach to actually doing this. But yeah, if this week you can just start with the idea of, think about how it could be different without any commitment to doing it. I'd actually prefer if you don't do it.
Yeah.
I think ultimately it's far more powerful to just sit inside you and consider what you might do differently. Yeah?
Yeah.
Because then that's your safest space, is inside yourself. So stay inside who you are. Just ask yourself, what might be different?